Yeah. All right. I think we're almost on YouTube. What was the question? First of all, welcome to everybody watching on YouTube as we are in our last Wednesday class of the Jewish year. We're going to continue after the holidays. But again, welcome everybody. And I think Flossie had a question.
Rabbi, I know we're going virtual now with the high holidays. Do you think we're going to be virtual for Simchas Torah?
We haven't decided that yet. So my guess is probably, but we may do it outside if we're allowed to. But it's impossible to know at this point.
Oh, that's interesting. In the park, you mean?
Maybe, but the mayor has said no, there are no gatherings in the parks right now. So we'll wait. We have to wait through September 30th, but we're going to have to wait. We had everything already all decided for everything. And then last Thursday we changed everything. And so the only thing we've gone over up to this point are Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, just because we're rushing to get all that ready. I apologize about it. We would have loved to have had live services. I know the conservative and the Orthodox synagogues but their synagogues are both probably capacity is twice what we can have and twice much more spread out. Our capacity, putting all the extra seats in, is probably about 450 at the very most. Wow. And their capacity, and without the extra seats, probably about under 400. Well, their capacities are probably 800 plus.
Wow, they need that space. They
have really giant sanctuaries. So it makes it a little bit easier for them. So unfortunately, ours is not. We talked about renting out a place, like renting out a big place like the Civic Center, but we decided not to do that, which is good because if we had, it would have been canceled anyway because of the new what they've done in the city. So we'll do the best we can. It is going to be live streamed this year as opposed to recorded. The music will be recorded because we're not going to have any singing in the sanctuary. Except for a few prayers here and there in the shofar. And so we'll do the best we can.
Oh, yeah. Well,
the technology is a lot more difficult this year because it's not being recorded. It's going to be live, adding the music that had been recorded ahead of time. So I imagine there'll be glitches here and there. And I haven't figured out who we're going to blame for that. But yeah, Larry will blame you. Good idea.
I was just curious, what is the JEA doing about religious school for children?
I don't know. Well, we're planning on having our religious school at this point, but we're not starting till after the high holidays.
Oh, okay.
We moved it back. The JA I think is still open. I think they're still going by the rules they had before. I know the preschool's open because my kid's there.
I'm just curious if they're requiring masks and things of that nature.
Yeah, masks have been already required there.
Oh, they have been. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And how about
masks have been required there for a while for all indoor.
Schools in Savannah, are the schools in Savannah requiring masks, do you know?
I don't think they're allowed to.
That's what I was wondering, whether or not, I think the governor's order is not, is in some school districts with defying it, and I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if the governor's order prohibits private organizations from doing it. I know there's a lot of lawsuits on that, but certainly for state, they are. So I don't think they can allow it in the schools. I think they can request it. I know at Savannah State, for instance, they can only request it. No?
Yes, be glad you're not in Texas. We have a governor who's going to run for president next time, and we can't do anything here but breathe if we pay for the air.
Well, I hope we all find our way through this very soon because it's, I think we held strong for a long time, but we held strong because we thought we see the light at the end of the tunnel. And now we realize the light's maybe a little farther down. So we're going to do the best we can. And we appreciate the understanding. We're going to do some private outdoor stuff for the families, just for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We're going to have an outdoor shofar blowing, so everybody can come to that. But we'll do the best we can. So today is our last class before we're going to take a couple of weeks off for the holidays. And basically what we talked about doing is just kind of going over an update of what the issues in the Jewish world are today. We talked about the Pew study last week, which is, of course, always enlightening. I think most of the things we knew, but there's always a few pieces of information. So we won't have any more classes for the rest of the month. But what we want to talk about is what are the things that are going well in the Jewish world, and what are the things that are not doing as well as we would hope. So that was what we had decided to do this week. The Pew study was perfect to do the week before because it has a pretty good analysis of the updated from 2013 views. And I'm actually going to talk about the Pew study on my second day Rosh Hashanah sermon, which is done. 3 sermons done already. They have to be edited still, but at least they're done. And they're not very good. They're because, at this point, who cares? But so we'll be talking a little bit about the Pew study. But it's where are we doing well and where are we struggling as a Jewish community? Often in the news, we focus on the problems we're facing, the anti-Semitism, obviously the pandemic, the uptick in hate, the restrictions that are being faced because of the pandemic. But we also have to realize we have a lot of successes that we sometimes forget to pay attention to because we're so used to it, or as a world, we kind of like to look at the negatives. So let's start off with the positives. What is going well for the Jewish community, which is a lot. If we compare ourselves to where we were 150 years ago or 200 years ago, it's not even close. We know we're so much more better off. Almost all Jews live in a modern Western society. Almost all Jews have a right to vote for their leaders. The educational level is very high. There is a country, Israel, where all Jews can move to, which is really rare these days to have that kind of opportunity. We see that Jews in the biggest Jewish countries, America and Israel, have almost complete opportunities to do whatever they want. There's almost no limitations, obviously. In Israel, if you're Jewish, in America, very few. I mean, except for president and vice president, we probably had Jews at every position in the country. There's very few places that restrict. Even hotels and places to live do not do that anymore. The overt hate has increased, but it's nowhere near what it was when we lived in other countries previously. So those are some, I think the Pew study also shows that we're increasing in number. This is something I'll talk about in my sermon. For the first time, probably, certainly in my lifetime, the percentage of Jews in America has grown along with the number of Jews. So we've gone from 2.2% to 2.4%, and we've added about 900,000 Jews in the last 6 years. Now, we know there are various reasons for that, but it does still bode well that at least our population is growing. We also know that a lot of that has to do with conversion, with the Orthodox having a lot of family. It also has to do with a lot of Jews who are today saying they're Jewish, even if they don't have that much of a connection to the Jewish world, but they are at least admitting they're Jewish. Although it wasn't part of the Pew study this time, I don't believe, when interfaith marriages occurred for a very long time, the odds were that it was a Christian and Jewish couple, that they would raise the child Christian. And as we know, those numbers have actually switched. I didn't see the latest in the Pew study. I must have missed that. But in the last Pew study and the one before, we see that it's actually more likely the couple will raise their kids Jewish now than Christian. So obviously, we don't proselytize. We're not going to grow in huge numbers until one day we decide to stop to do that. But at least we're steady. And there's about 7.5 million Jews in America, and there's I think 8 or 8.5 in Israel. So we're probably up to like 16 or 17 million Jews in the world now. The number was really 12 to 14 for like a half century after the Holocaust. So the baby boomers, of course, had a lot of kids. Then for generations or two, we had very few. I think the number of kids is growing. I think after the pandemic, it's going to grow even more, obviously. But So what are the other positives all of you see in the world, the Jewish world today? Flossie.
I don't think enough people realize this, but how Israel was one of the first responders to Surfside in Florida, and how they sent over heroes, I'll call it, helpers, doctors, everything, because I saw something on the email of when they were going back, and there was such a cheer and appreciation to Israel of who they sent. And I don't think Israel, who often is one of the first countries in with the tragedy, plays it up enough. I mean, I don't think they should be there. We did it, congratulations, but I don't think enough people realize how they are giving of themselves to be there.
Michael and Larry?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Flossie, and it's not a new phenomenon. Israel has sent people to various countries, including countries in Western Europe when they've had catastrophes, and there's just not a lot of publicity about that. There's really not a lot of publicity towards any country, including the U.S. when countries send people, but you're right, and Israel doesn't get a lot of credit for other things, especially
For anything.
technology and drug research, and I don't know that that's unique to Israel, but really good point, Flossie.
And I think Israel. I'm sorry, Larry. Go ahead.
No, go on ahead. Go on.
No, after you.
Yeah, I just want to mention two other things that come to mind. One is the Abraham Accords. I don't want to put that onto the sidelines. I think that, and we haven't heard very much about it, but I mean, that was really a very positive step as far as establishing relations with the other countries, United Emirates countries and so forth. It just seemed to be, a big step. And the other thing that I think is we've seen this invasion of TV programs that somehow have captured everybody's imagination that, as far as what is the Jewish community about, and it shows them as, Shtisel in particular, as real living people with faults and problems of our own. And, I think some of that is really, hit a resonant tone in worldwide. So I would mention those two.
I'm writing it down. I think you're right. The TV shows, I know.
But I did want to ask, Rabbi, is there a complementary study that you're aware of to the Pew study that looks at worldwide Judaism or Israel in particular, with some of the same kind of questions and issues and I know part of the Pew study said that, what we may see is really an increase in worldwide Judaism, maybe a difference in the way the question was asked and maybe more of an accounting problem, not problem, but an accounting peculiarity, let's call it that way, because the way the question was asked and more people responded because they saw this category had opened up. But have we seen a growth in worldwide Judaism? And
we have. I mean, overall, we know. Again, there's two countries have almost all the Jews. I mean, it's just basically Israel and America. I mean, we've got 85 to 90% of the Jews in two countries. In both countries, obviously, the population is growing. The Jewish population in Israel obviously is growing more because they passed America like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So yes, the Jewish number is growing. It's not, you don't compare, is it growing? You compare, is it growing comparatively to the other groups? Like the numbers go up, but are the numbers going up at the same rate as everybody else? And in America, our rate was higher than the average American, which takes into account everybody. I don't know anything about Israel in terms of a Pew study. The Pew study does look at the views of Israel, but again, by people here. So that's a good question. I think it'd be very interesting to see some of the study, if they could do some sort of study like that in Israel from an Israeli perspective. I imagine most of the things that would come out would be something were not surprising, but like in this last one, there were a few very surprising things, as everything else does. So But I think the Abraham Accords, again, because of the pandemic, is not getting, plus Israel's negative publicity we know is beyond anything any country has ever had before. So those two things will squash any positives. But I think Israel is slowly behind the scenes, continuing to nurse these relationships, and we'll see what happens. I think, as we know, in the Middle East, the issue is always going to be Iran. Now it's going to be Afghanistan too, but it's Iran, and everything else is secondary. The pandemic obviously has taken a foothold there, but in the Middle East, that's the issue that is really on the table. It's what's Iran doing, and probably Afghanistan, man, I imagine as well. Larry, and then
just getting
Flossie.
back to Michael's point about some of the accomplishments of Israel. This is in as you know, we get the Jewish news here, the Jewish Journal it's called, and the latest issue of the Jewish Journal calls this Corona, I don't know if you could read it, Corona game changer vaccine tested, oral vaccine tested by Israeli company. Which is basically, they've just gotten permission from the Israeli health authorities, whatever the equivalent is of the Food and Drug Administration in Israel, to do some human tests on pills now. And the advantage of pills is that long shelf life, that, it can be used in third world countries worldwide and things like this. And I know your wife is a member of Hadassah, and my wife's obviously a member, Flossie's a member, many other people. And, and so we hear a lot more, maybe general public doesn't hear a lot more, but we hear a lot more about, Hadassah and the medical accomplishments. This is another one that just is on the front page here. And the other one that's interesting is that Biden has just appointed Deborah Lipstadt.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as the anti-Semitism envoy, which happens to be an ambassador post. I never realized it, but going back, she's the fourth one. She's the one from Emory University. The one
I met her several times. Yeah.
Yeah, the movie, if you saw that movie about the
Woman in
Holocaust
Red, yeah.
denier, the one that takes place in England, where she's sued. And basically, so she's been appointed.
She was sued, yeah.
As the anti-Semitism envoy, as the ambassador from the United States for anti-Semitism.
Who were the previous three?
I was looking at them. They don't really say.
I
They
can
just
look
say
at
that
them.
she was the fourth, and the first one was created in 2004. So I don't know who the other three were.
I'll look it up right now.
So kudos for Georgia again. Though it's Atlanta, not Savannah.
But it's the state. The state has a lot of good things going for it. As with everything else, we sometimes concentrate on the negative. So, Office of Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism. Is that it?
Yeah, I don't know the exact title, but it's something like that.
That's pretty cool. Let's see who they were. There's so many things I learned from you guys. This is actually a State Department. You're right. It's a State Department thing. Cool.
Yeah, it's a real ambassador, apparently. It has to be approved by Congress.
That's amazing.
Excellent.
Was she?
Well, I don't know about you,
I
but
don't know if it's
I'm
in
running for
process.
next. That's what I'm running for next.
Oh, you're going to run for that post? You're going to oppose her?
I'll let her do it a few years when she's finished. I don't want to
That's
step
right.
on her.
Let her complete her term.
Yeah, her term. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. Let's see who the previous ones were. Does it say? Doesn't say who the previous ones were on here.
Mystery. 2004 apparently was the first one, it said. So it's probably more than a 2-year term. Yeah.
It was Obama, wasn't it? 2004.
Who was president in 2004?
Was it Obama?
Bush.
Bush 43. Yeah.
It's State Department Ambassador at Large. That's pretty cool. I think Michael should get this one next. I trust him.
Well, I am trustworthy.
Michael, did you
There's an
get
article on it.
a haircut?
Me?
Jay, yes.
Okay.
Jay,
So
this
did Larry.
afternoon.
No, Michael.
Oh.
She has Michael.
Michael.
I don't see it, but I'll find it later. Flossie.
this fits in and yet it doesn't, but just curious. As we're looking at things with the Jewish community, do you feel in time the Orthodox, conservative, and Reform are moving closer together, or dialogue is happening more? We're always talking the Arabs and the Jews, and yet I find it very sad that Jews and Jews can't often communicate.
And that was actually part of the Pew study. And it does say the opposite, that we're probably getting farther apart. But you also have to remember, they're closer here in America probably than other places. So if it's getting far, think of if it's farther apart here and other places, the rift is much larger. We happen to have a much larger modern Orthodox who will work and talk with Reform and that kind of stuff, where in other countries, that's not always the case. In most countries, there is a very big division between liberal Judaism and Orthodox Judaism. Not necessarily like if you're an Orthodox Jew and you go up to somebody who is not affiliated with any movement, it's not as big a deal. But if you're an Orthodox Jew and a Reform Jew, there's some, unfortunately, a lot of differences, a lot of issues there in other places here. So, but that's something we've been dealing with for, forever. As we know, sometimes issues are more difficult within families than outside of families. But the basic question was, do Reform Jews feel like they have a lot in common with Orthodox Jews? Do Orthodox Jews have a lot in common with Reform Jews? And the answer was no. And I think Orthodox were even at a higher rate of no than the Reform and conservative. It's something to worry about, but it's also something to know that a lot of the Orthodox Jews live in their own world. I mean, the Hasidim, they all live in their own world. They're not going outside it at all. So that's a hard egg to crack. The modern Orthodox, I think, is something we could really do a lot more with. So it's an issue on both sides of the plate. It's not one or the other.
Figuring this out.
Yeah, Larry.
Yeah, just sort of off the topic, but also in this Jewish news magazine or newsletter, every month they have a different rabbi, and this month they have the Chabad rabbi, and he's talking about the high holidays and things like this. And he said something interesting here, which I wonder if I've never heard before. Is he says that Yom Kippur is the holiday to ask for atonement for the sin of the golden calf, which I know we ask for, forgiveness for a lot of sins, but I've never seen that one.
Well, again, that's like the greatest sin in our history. For some, obviously, we go by the phrase that God only does not carry our sins over but a couple of generations, whereas our successes God carries over a multitude of generations. But there's some people believe that is the ultimate mistake that we made in our history that really changed the course of development. Others believe that it was a natural order. But yeah, it's, the idea that we're being punished for the sins of our ancestors who are so far back is really a little alarming. It's almost a anti-Jewish Christian thing. We killed Jesus and we're still, even if I believe that were true, that was 2,000 years ago. I mean, that's a hard, cross to bear for 2,000 years. I'm sure that, I'll check that. That's a very interesting thing. I know people do believe that, but it's not something that we really talk about much. Flossie.
Rabbi was going back with sin, then even further, or maybe it was even further, Eve eating the apple.
Right.
Is that considered a bad thing to have done?
Oh my goodness. That has been a real problem for society. We have taken courses just on that. The issues that women have faced because of that story has galvanized the world against women for untold generations. And so there's a whole, many believe that's One of the reasons women were second-class citizens because of this story. Bruce Feiler connects it to the change in the world once we start creating city states and really nation building and war and strength. And when the male culture started to become dominant and they needed to find stories that would explain the reason that men need to be in charge. So yeah, that's been a real problem. So we'll Noel and then Larry.
I'm in a unique situation that's a little offbeat from what we're talking about, but on my block, there is a Russian Jewish family, and because the grandmother, who still doesn't speak English, but her daughter said they never told anyone in Russia they were Jewish. They hid for fear of what would happen to them. So when they got here, the little girl, who's the same age of my next door neighbor's little girl, wanted to play together. And the people next door happened to be, call them, they're Christians. They are Lutheran, pastor, and family. And the mother would not let the little Jewish girl come over. And the little brother called her a dirty Jew girl. And everybody was trying to put it under the carpet. And I just said, this is not right. This is not right. And when I went over there, I could see things going on with the middle child, who's a boy, that disturbed me. And I told them, this has to be reported to CPS. And then she let into me and said they were just playing. They were not just playing. And so I got in the middle of all of this stuff. And so I can't do anything. I can report it. I just avoid them totally. But this is not the way it should be. We should be trying to get together and resolve issues.
Yeah, and I think
it's never going to happen.
There's definitely an uptick in anti-Semitism that we've seen over the last few years. It kind of matches the uptick in hate crimes against other groups, but as we know from the ADL study, that the Jews are the number one religious group that hate groups go after. Obviously, we're nowhere near African Americans in terms of total hate crimes, but we're certainly number one when it comes to religion. I think I talked about that recently. Larry.
Yeah, I just wanted to get back to, the story about women. Jane and I just saw a movie that was kind of interesting called, and I may say the name wrong, Beruya. And it's an Israeli film. We're very fortunate here in the Monmouth County Library's got an enormous number of Israeli films. And this was one that I had never seen and never even heard about. But it's basically the story that some rabbi had come up with in about 2,000 years ago, where he asked one of his rabbinical students to basically try to almost seduce his wife to prove that women are unfaithful, and that he wants to make the point at the same point as in the Adam and Eve story, that women can't be trusted and things like this. And it's an interesting film, and it's one that is worth discussing. I don't want to discuss the whole thing, but the whole idea of being unfaithful was perpetuated, I think, by rabbis as well, that women were unfaithful, at least through this one story. I don't know how widespread, that particular story is. I don't think it's, it's a Torah story, but it's
it's in the Talmud.
It sounds like it's from Talmud or rabbinical, things like that. I'm sure you're familiar with it, right?
Oh, yeah. Jews were no different than every other society. In many ways, we were probably better because we did have rules as to how you treat women. But women were, still not considered equal in many respects as men, although there was an official separate but equal relationship according to Jewish law, but we all know what separate but equal means in reality. So that's something that, we have to face, and we're still facing it in the world today. America has obviously done a lot better job, but in most places in the world, women would not be considered equal in everything or even close. So we'll go Flossie and then Noel.
Two quick things. One, it's interesting saying that, and yet Israel had a Jewish leader of the country, Golda Meir. So here we're talking about how they feel about women having that. And Larry, could you spell the name of that movie?
I think the rabbi, I have to defer to the rabbi on it. Baruch.
I don't know how you're going to spell it in English, but you can just,
Baruya,
There's-
B-R-U-B,
B-R-U.
something like that. It's a B-R though.
it's a very prominent woman in the Talmud, and you'll read a lot about her.
This is a modern day version of that.
Oh, it's a
same
modern day
story.
version.
Yes,
Okay.
it takes place in modern Israel
Oh, that I
now,
didn't
and
know.
it's about how a particular family whose rabbi had resurrected the story and shown that it was untrue, and then other rabbis are trying to prove that it's true by trying to reenact the Berua story of having them seduce their wife.
Baruya.
Berua. It's an interesting movie.
And of course-
Reading and discussing, yeah. If you
Of
can
course,
get it.
that is a very, a very good way to test a theory is try it with one single woman.
Right.
And if she fails, then categorically say all women would fail. That's a very scientific method that has been done by men for generations.
But they never tested
Flossie,
men.
Flossie to finish in the Noel.
Would you email me the name? I can't go into a
I'll
library.
try and, yeah,
We'll try to spell it.
I'll try and spell it better than what I can, yeah.
Noel.
Yes, R.V. Wade has been overturned in Texas. And so anyone who either aids in an abortion will get fined $10,000. It doesn't even have to be in Texas. It can be in any state. And it's a nightmare.
Texas?
I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where Planned Parenthood did a lot of work
Clearly.
with women, to help with other things than abortion. And so they've been swept under the rug, and, I don't know what I can do.
Well, these are the issues. Yeah. in the
Well,
Jewish
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been rules and laws enacted that if you try to go to a different state, it's still considered illegal to do it, which is really, and the Jewish world has a lot of issues. Israel has a lot, for all Israel's done for its women, there are a lot of issues there still in the Orthodox community, still in the military. And one of the interesting issues is a lot of people in Israel want the Orthodox to serve in the military because they don't. However, when they serve in the military, they refuse to take orders from a woman. So Israel's forced to take women out of these positions and keep them away from them. And that's one of the other issues that Israel faces. Jeff.
Yeah. Going back, with women also is, I don't know if you remember the stampede they had there around the holiday time, and there were 10 or 12 people trampled on. I don't remember the number, but I remember hearing an Orthodox rabbi's explanation for that. It was kind of, if women had been more modest, he was saying, maybe God's punishment, this wouldn't have happened. It's also blaming the victim. We've seen this before with the Holocaust. The Holocaust was actually, the fault of the Jews. Some Jews said they weren't religious enough and they didn't follow God, so this is God's punishment. Other Christians said that it's the Jews' fault because of the Jesus killing supposedly. So everybody a lot of times blames the victim instead of, the perpetrator.
And again,
These explanations sometimes are really weird.
yeah, when you live in that isolated society where they have total control over you, that's the only information you're getting is from one source. That's one of the issues. Again, those are some of the negative. Michael, sorry, Michael.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, after you,
What's your
please.
thought?
I have no thoughts. They just
Okay. No, I was
speak
just
from
gonna
my
say,
mouth out.
I was just gonna say, and I don't want to make this a, political thing, but, discussion, but, Noel, if you live in Texas and you go somewhere else, Texas law does not apply to actions that you undertake that are legal in that jurisdiction. So you don't need to worry about that. I mean, the Constitution, clearly protects you. And then I am going to make it political, because
First time ever it's been political in this.
yeah, I've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years that that the next big fundraising campaign on the left is going to be to support sort of like an underground railroad, so that women who live in states that have major restrictions on abortion can go to other states and have an abortion. I think a lot of us are going to be donating money for that.
That's an interesting thought. And again, a lot of these things affect Jews specifically. A lot of them don't. But as Jews, we consider ourselves part of this world. So Flossie, then Larry.
Going back to Eve and the snake, how is it told in the Torah? It was free will because she ate the apple, but was God testing her? Or, I mean, I can't remember all the details of the story, but I don't see how we can truly just blame her.
Well, it's easy for people to blame anybody depending on how they look at the story. The story is these stories are very short, and it's really up to various perspectives. Eve gave him probably a date or a fig, and he ate it. So I can easily blame her. In the story, God blames both of them. And it appears to many people that God was more upset that they lied or didn't take responsibility than the action itself. But for a very long time, the Eve apple idea has been part of the world in a lot of different religions. I remember reading Bruce Feiler's book. What was his book called? Forgot the name of it. It's the one about Eve and Adam. And the Sistine Chapel was off limits to women for several hundred years.
Wow.
And so the only woman who ever went into the Sistine Chapel was Eve.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the cleaning lady.
So she was the only woman in the Sistine Chapel for hundreds of years, right above everybody.
Yeah.
So it's something that we're improving on, but there's still a lot of issues. And the Jewish world does really well. We've done some great things, especially in the liberal Jewish world when it comes to women. They're still not proportionally up there in leadership positions, but much more so than they were previously. And each generation, it gets better and better. But again, I think we're doing wonderful things in our country when it comes to women in many perspectives. We have a woman vice president who is of color, whose husband is Jewish. We have a lot of women leaders of companies. We have women who are in positions of power, but we still have a lot of places to go. Georgia has only had one female senator. And it was only for a day.
Well, more than a day, but.
It was a day. I'll talk. Yeah, it's a really strange story. There's been no Black woman governor in the history of America. So the first gay woman to be mayor of a city happened in Houston about 15 years ago, only 15 years ago. So there's there's still a long way to go for a lot of things, but it's certainly better. But that a lot has to do with the 70s women's movement, the 60s, but there's still a long way to go. It's hard when it comes to women because we always think of minorities having so many issues, but women are never a minority. So it's not, I think, looked at it the same way. They're actually a majority overall,
Yeah.
I was just asking.
but treated as man. Larry?
I just wanted to go back for a minute as to the rabbi who wrote the Chabad article here, and he agrees with what you said. He says Adam and Eve were challenged. He blames both of them on their first day of life and failed miserably. But he takes a wider spin on this, and he says remembering their story allows us to be mindful of the fact that we're granted free choice, and doing the right thing is not a given. Perfecting our world depends on the choices we make every day. So he takes this very negative event of, Adam and Eve to kind of spin it around and say that, free choice is something that we were given almost intentionally, but you've got to be mindful of the free choices. But he does say it's both Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
And just
I
Eve.
think that's a
in the
much
Chabad,
better
yeah.
perspective. And you're going to have people who look at it from a wide range of perspectives. So hopefully it's getting better and better. In the Jewish world, especially the liberal world, women have really risen, not to the point where they probably should be, but certainly over the last 30 years have become more and more prominent. So that's definitely kudos to us. We're still waiting for women leaders in a lot of areas, but again, it takes time sometimes, unfortunately. So that's an area that we're doing pretty well, comparatively speaking. There are a lot more. I remember when I was in school, rabbinical school, I think my class was the first or one of the first in which there were more women in the rabbinical school than men in my class year. And that's kind of been a trend. I don't know if it continued for a long time. At some point, it's going to be mostly a lot more Jewish women as rabbis in leadership positions because the numbers were just skewing that way. Jeff?
Everything is, really, in our lifetime, things have really opened up for women in so many areas. There were so many professions they were barred from, the so-called glass ceilings. There were professions that were absolutely no women at all, like airline pilots, military pilots. Now women have the right to go out and fight in combat and die just like men. So that's a big step in this country. We even have had women rangers, which was really one of the real macho positions in the Army, and women have now completed the course. I believe 2 have. They didn't change the course, so it's really difficult. You need a lot of physical strength for it and athletic ability. But things are opening up. It's gradual, but
Hopefully it'll go faster.
probably getting better.
So, Larry and Flossie?
Yeah, I was just doing, I'm going to do a program on Friday on Kander and Ebb on the 2 musicians, John Kander and Fred Ebb, who wrote Chicago and who wrote Cabaret and, wrote so many other great musicals. And I came across some of their other musicals that were not, that were also very, very good, but were not as widely received. And one of them was called Woman of the Year, in which Lauren Bacall starred on Broadway. I think it was like in the 1980s. And one of the famous songs that are from the musical is How Did She Succeed to Become Woman of the Year? And she succeeds by becoming one of the boys. And she does the things that the boys do. She goes to the baseball game. She has a beer with them. And it's kind of a spoof on, and you see how things have changed, but that's how she broke the glass ceiling, by actually joining the club, of men.
And that was one of the issues, to have one of these roles, you had to become a man-like, which was kind of strange.
Right.
Hopefully that's disappearing, but we know that's still around in a lot of places. Flossie?
Well, I'm saying as a spoof, how we're saying women looking to do things like men. And I think women should give men the opportunity to give birth.
Yeah. Then the population will cease.
That's not a choice.
Not a choice.
The funny thing is, if you did that, it wouldn't be that men wouldn't have children. It'd be that no man would have a second one. We remember pain a lot more clearly than women, and that actually has been proven. So there would never be a second baby, and if a guy hadn't. So those are other issues. Other things that we're doing well is that we already talked about the Abrahamic Accords, but in America, there are still Jews who are still connected to Israel, although we talk about those who aren't, but there's still a lot of Jews who go to Israel well before, obviously, the pandemic. A lot of Jews in America feel pride in being Jewish. That number has gone up, which is really nice to hear, along with, obviously, the fear of anti-Semitism. But even though anti-Semitism is on the rise, it has had a very minimal effect in the Jewish world as to whether people don't do something Jewish because of fear. That is actually really rare. So it's if somebody's not doing something Jewishly, it's rarely ever because of fear. It's because of other reasons. So these are things that, again, in previous years and generations would be unheard of. I think also, in many respects, although I'm not sure it was as high as the last Pew study, people who are not Jewish generally respect Jews or the idea of Judaism. We were a very respected religion. I didn't see that on this last one, but I may have missed it. The last one, it was the most respected religion in America was Judaism from outside. Yeah, it's like over 90%. In the Pew study during the year that Joseph Lieberman was running for vice president, so it was 2004. There's a 2004. It was found that as opposed to people not voting for someone for president because they were Jewish, people, 90% would rather vote for someone who was very dedicated to Judaism. That was really high. So the fact that he was an Orthodox Jew was actually helping the election, although obviously they didn't win, but that was not something that restricted them, was his being Jewish. It was quite the opposite. It was actually a feather in the cap. So that's interesting to see. Also, politically, we think of Jews as being liberals and part of the Democratic Party, which is still true, but more traditional Jews tend to be part of the Republican Party. So there are Jews in both places. And I think one of the things that is very interesting, I get this a lot, why are so many Jews Democrats? The percentages are, and a lot of people say because of views, because of this and that. Well, one of the reasons is simply geography. That's probably the major reason. Where do most Jews live?
City.
New York City.
Right.
So if you look at where Jews live, they, by a huge percentage, live in Democratic areas. Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Miami. So certainly there are other reasons, but that is one of the reasons people seem to neglect. So certainly there are philosophical reasons, obviously, but again, a lot of it has to do with location. So it's interesting to see that politically we do matter, even though we're such a small, mostly because there's enough Jews in Georgia and Texas and Florida and some of the other states that make a difference. Ohio. Michael.
Yeah, just an anecdote, because I'm kind of a political junkie, but I was going over some precinct data from 2020, and there's a neighborhood in Queens in New York. It's called Kew Gardens, and there's a very, very large Jewish community there. There's a big shul, Young Israel of Kew Gardens. It's massive. I've gone to services there, and that area voted for Trump 80-20. It's really, it's just a really religious area, and over the years it's gotten more and more and more religious. So,
but Young Israel is an Orthodox congregation.
Yeah, I'm saying that it's almost ultra Orthodox.
Right. And their view is they
Yeah.
swing very heavily Republican.
Well, and again, a lot of,
Just
you
an
know,
anecdote about
Yeah.
urban living and.
yeah, and I think that's how it's been skewing in the last couple of
Yeah.
years, that really religiously, it's one, you know, more traditional you are, the more likely there to be one party, the more liberal you are. You'll be. So again, we're in both worlds a little bit. Flossie.
Where did the concept of Tashlik come up? When, how many years ago, and how did that idea?
How did
That is a good question.
Just asking me why I asked that, because the holiday is coming soon.
You know what? The problem is, unlike most people, I don't connect Tashlik to the Republican Democrats debates within the Jewish traditional liberal world. But that should be the first thing I think about. I don't know when it began. That is something I'm going to look up. And it's definitely become more popular in recent years in the liberal world. Let me see if anybody knows. If I know it's, you know, based in the 13th century.
13th century in Europe, right?
I would get, that would be my guess.
Yeah.
that or Israel?
Or Israel, okay.
Yeah, it sounds like it's one of these spiritual awakenings that kind of started in the 13th century, but really got more popular through the years, through the mysticism. That's a good question. No.
Yes, do you have any idea, I know you haven't been here for a long time, why Chabad has just grown and grown and grown? It's everywhere. You can belong to Chabad, you know, 2 streets down from my house. It's all over, and I think they're getting more people involved in their movement, and I don't know why.
Well, it's a
Do
very
you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think there's been lots of studies. One, you know, you send young, dedicated people to places where there are not as many Jews, and they have, you know, they do programs, outreach, a lot of fundraising, but they don't have the
Yeah.
same issues of a Sunday school or running the community or all of these extra things of building necessarily. So they have specifically geared to fundraising and outreach. And for people who are not affiliated with movements, it's very enticing. Some people think it's a great way for me to get my Judaism without being too far in, because they're doing it for me. Others get really excited about the excitement and the organizational structure. But yeah, it's been an outreach group for generations, but they're not looking for converts, although they're, you know, or people to become more Jewish. You know, you don't have to become more Jewish to be part of Chabad. You can be very liberal and still be dedicated to it. So they're kind of an all-encompassing, welcoming machine. Yeah. And, you know, they really bring young people to, you know, all over the place. It's Larry.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with an area up in New Jersey here called Monroe, New York, exit 8A on the Turnpike. There are a lot of places given the Turnpike or Garden State Parkway, but they have an enormous number of retirement communities there that are kind of co-located, and they have a Chabad there. We visited our friends there. We passed a building, and the building was Chabad. And I mentioned to our friends, you know, do you go to this Chabad? They said, that's not the Chabad. Even though they call themselves Chabad, it's like Chabad 2. Now, these are people that are spin-offs, apparently. So even within the Chabad community, these are people that don't recognize Rabbi Schneerson or any of his disciples as being the true leader, and they form their own community. I don't know if it's widespread or if it's just a New Jersey thing or it's just this local community, but it's kind of interesting that that they've spun off now and formed their own kind of subset of the Chabad.
What are they called, Larry?
They call themselves Chabad something, you know, maybe they have a slight, I didn't pay enough attention. I just assumed that it was Chabad is Chabad, you know, that everybody
Yeah, we
is,
rode by.
you know, it's almost like the Pope, you know, that everybody is, you know, marching
Roman
to the same
Catholic,
tune, yeah.
right.
But apparently
Yeah.
it's at least in this one place in New Jersey, and there may be others as well, I'm sure. But they have their own building now, their own congregation, their own rabbi, and their own following, who apparently have departed from, mainstream Chabad.
Yeah, it's amazing. And religious groups, they all seem to spin off over some type of an issue or another. That's
Yeah.
ongoing continuously in the Christian world. I just learned the other day, I didn't even realize it, but the Methodists spun off from the Baptists over the issue, can ministers have slaves or not?
Oh, is
So
that right?
that was another, and I hadn't heard that until I
This
went
was
to
a
a,
few years ago, Jane.
yeah, until I went to an Ollie course. And that came up about early Southern history, how the Methodists spun off.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, again, Chabad is interesting because they have a very different type of outlook as to the Messiah. Like we just had the Messiah. And so it doesn't really mesh with others, but the viewpoint seems to I don't think all Chabadniks believe that, but I think a lot of them do. So it's really an interesting, quandary is how they're so successful when they have a belief system that the people who are donating to them and going there may not agree with. So it's really, they're also just very enthusiastic, and they're very, excited about Judaism, which can be, as we know, can be contagious. All right. So just to make sure everybody knows, we are doing virtual services. We sent out the new schedule. We're not going to have, because we were going to have 2 evening services for Rosh Hashanah and 2 Kol Nidre services. We're now going to have 1. So just check the schedule. We will be having the shofar blowing here 4:30 on that Tuesday for anybody who wants to hear it live and in person. And again, we apologize that we decided not to have live services. All the people we talked with, it was pretty unanimous, although we know there are people in the congregation who would really prefer we had in-person services. But unfortunately, this is just what we're also looking to possibly do is maybe in October is do a once a month Friday night service on Zoom as well. So we're looking into doing that as we did before. I think that's probably very likely going to happen, if not more.
Could you go over the schedule that, and I know you said we're not meeting till after Yom Kippur, right? Are we meeting in September at all, or?
Now, our next meeting, just to make it easier for everybody to remember, will be October 6th. We're going
Okay.
to review the book, Everything is Illuminated.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
great.
wow.
And
That's great.
read that. I'll have, and then
That is
we
such
do
a good
we do
book.
have scheduled October 20th at Jeff and Flossie's house. We'll go ahead and leave that on the schedule for now, if that's okay. But obviously, if it's not feasible, we won't do it. Or maybe we could even meet in a park or some outdoor area. October seems like if we can find an outdoor area that's maybe do a lunch thing in an outdoor area that has a covering, we could do something like that. But did you guys, we'll just keep it on the schedule until we know we have to change it. Flossie?
We have a big backyard.
Oh, great.
So if you'd rather have it outdoors, we will work.
That is an excellent idea.
Kathy and Jane to come back. We're going to have it when you're back.
Good,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. But Rabbi, the one thing that Jeff and I will say, anyone who comes has to have been vaccinated.
Yeah, I think I agree. We just haven't,
And we'll see. I've called some of the people that used to be members of our group and told them I miss them and coming back. And we'll see how many come, but we could do outdoors and manage.
right. And we don't have to ask everybody to send their cards in because we have a list already of a lot of them who already have. You just need to show it one time, and not everybody will have had access to the booster by then, but most people probably will. So, you can decide.
Can I
Rabbi?
make a recommendation also for the October 6th? We're doing it on Zoom, right? The October 6th.
Right.
Yeah.
meeting. If you can, watch the movie. The book is a lot more complicated than the film is. The film basically uses only one part of the book. So it would be interesting to do a comparison. But I think if you may get confused by the book because it goes back and forth in time so quickly, whereas the movie is more chronological. But it'd be worth talking about how to, watching the movie. And
Is it on
And-
Netflix, or how do we get the movie?
I'm sure the library has it.
Yeah, it's very popular,
Let me
but
see.
they also have an audio, and the audio is terrific because you hear the voices changing.
Oh, yeah, the audio book is very
And
good.
it makes it very, very easy to follow as.
I think it's on Netflix also.
Oh,
Yeah, it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix, and Amazon, something called NORD VPN. I don't know what that is.
I'd like to see it again. It was a good book, so.
Did you tell
It's
them?
one of my wife's favorite books. I still have not read it, and I have not seen the movie either. I think I saw the movie,
Jewish
or at least parts of it.
No.
It's amazing though, Rabbi, that the audio book is so illuminating compared to the written word that you have to look at and
That's-
read.
Well, what we're going to do in your class is we're doing something on the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the next, I think I sent it out, but we're doing October 6th, everything is illuminated. October 13, I'm going to pick a philosopher from the Many Faces of God. October 20th, we're going to do the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's a live in-person one. And then Great Jewish Museums on October 27th.
Oh, wonderful. Wow,
That.
that's an ambitious program.
Yep. Once High Holidays is over, it won't be so. But I'm so happy I got to spend today with you guys before the holidays. Again, thank you for your understanding of us not hosting things the next couple weeks on this Wednesday, and also of High Holidays not being in person. It was
Well, it's not your fault.
a major decision that we waited to the last second because we were really hoping we could do it, and it didn't work out. So, and if there are any
Okay.
issues with the technology, we apologize, but again, we only had about a week and a half to get ready with the new schedule.
You and the family be well. And did
And
you
you guys
get
too.
Did you get our
Ditto.
thanking you?
A wonderful year
Oh,
ahead.
yes, thank you. That was,
Okay, because I wanted to make sure you knew how we felt. Okay.
Well, you beat me to the punch.
We'll punch together, Janie.
Janie, amazing. The Broward Library, which is a large Jewish area, of course, carries the book. Everything is illuminated, but only in ebook form, not in audio. So I got to check our local libraries for the audio version.
yeah, I may want to pick that up as well. I may do that because I love
Audio
audio.
version is wonderful.
Yeah. Z
I don't-
Library, we've been using Z Library, it's called. Oh, I'm not supposed to tell you this.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's okay.
Okay, I just told it. And apparently you can
Z
download
Library?
books. People here have told us about it, and you can download so many books for free.
What is the name of that library?
Z,
Like
the
in
letter Z,
zebra.
and just the word library, yeah. And,
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of free things on Kindle. I can't go to our library because I lost a DVD, a disc from one of the books I borrowed 4 years ago. I don't want to pay for the whole thing. So
Maybe on Yom Kippur, you could ask for forgiveness.
yeah, I've asked for, yeah, because I left it in a rent-a-car I used, one of them. So
God.
Oh,
give it
yeah.
I'm gonna have to pay the whole thing, like
Bite the bullet.
$40, probably
You know,
4
there-
years of interest.
There was a Seinfeld episode about that.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was.
It was a takeoff on the rabbi.
That's right. That they have cameras there. I'm not allowed in that building. Has nothing to do with COVID.
Yeah.
But
You know,
you guys-
Jackie Mason just died, Rabbi.
I
I'm sure
saw
you're
that.
aware-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of that. Jackie
Oh,
Mason,
really?
yeah, just died.
Oh,
They-
did
wasn't
you
aware of
really?
I
that.
saw
Yeah,
that in
that's-
the Jewish news as well, yeah.
And Ed Asner died too.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
I never knew he was Jewish and
Oh
he
yeah.
was such a political activist. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Had a real second career in the Pixar movies.
How old was Jackie Mason? Do you remember?
In his 80s, right?
Oh, no, he was older than that.
Older than that, really?
Yeah.
I have his obituary here in
Yeah,
the
I read
Jewish
his
news.
obituary.
and,
He died.
You're right. He was in his 90s.
Yeah.
He just turned 93.
That's encouraging to us seniors.
Yeah,
He
93,
is not
July
like,
24th, he died at 93, yeah. He first turned to comedian at age 30.
Well,
He was Orthodox, I guess, up until that time. He left. it
Oh, well, he
behind.
certainly changed views after that.
yeah.
I was not a Jackie Mason fan.
We've seen him live and a couple of times. I thought I enjoyed him. Flossie doesn't.
I don't either.
What you think now?
The other prominent Jew that died was Carl Levin, who was the senator
Oh.
from Michigan.
Oh, yes, I
For
remember.
Wow.
7 years, very, very prominent
Are you,
in the foreign
Larry,
affairs
are
department.
you the official obituary?
No, I'm just this newspaper from our county.
From
here,
Ocean
from
County,
Ocean
of all
County,
places.
It's just
Well,
got
Larry, how often does it come out? This is old news. I mean, I hate
It's
to
old
say
news.
it.
yeah. Sorry, I'll give you the new news.
He died a month ago, so not too long. Thank you
On a
for,
live note.
thank you for letting us know who has passed away, Larry. We'll keep that on.
Okay.
Stay safe, like your, and Jeff, you won for the best shirt today.
Oh,
Uh,
Yeah, that is the.
No,
What
I,
does it say?
I
Sun
can't
City
say it.
Table Tennis.
no, I came directly from that to here. I had a very short session
Is that,
today.
is
I
that,
didn't want to miss the Wednesday class here, so
Right.
I
Well, we
cut a
appreciate
2-hour session short to a half an hour.
you guys stay safe. Good luck. Are you gonna go back there and take some people down?
And have a healthy and a happy, everybody.
All
Yes,
you and your
everybody.
families. All our best.
Wish you
Bye-bye.
nothing
See you
but-
soon.
Bye-bye.
I will see you next week.
Me?
October 6th.
October 6th.
That's our
Bye-bye.
next class.
Bye-bye.
We're
Our next class is October 6th, the first one in October.
Right,
Okay.
October 6th, right.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
Stay safe, everybody.